Hello again. This time I'm going to review a car DVR camera. It's this model, it's just called the HD DVR. It doesn't have a specific model name, but as you can see from that it does record in HD. We'll look at a few more of the specifications. I'll point out the more important ones. First of all, it's got a 2.5-inch LCD screen which enables you to frame the pictures properly. It records at 720p at 30 frames a second. It'll support SDHC cards up to 64 gigabytes. It records automatically when it's powered up. It cycles the recordings, which means it deletes the oldest ones on the card, and it's got an HDMI socket. So let's have a look what's inside the box. Okay, well, there's a USB A to B lead, there's a 12-volt car power adapter, there's a sucker thing to mount it onto your windscreen, and then there's the camera itself. Oh, and I forgot to mention there's the instruction leaflet, which is actually pretty good and in proper English for a change. Onto the camera itself, well, it's very lightweight and it's all made out of plastic. It reminded me a lot of a StarTAC mobile phone. We'll talk you around the buttons to show you what the different things are. First off, on the left hand side here, we've got that HDMI socket. We've got an on-off button, a menu button, a record snap. I don't know why I'm saying these because you could read them, but anyway, I'll explain them later. There is an SD card slot there which takes full-size SD cards. I'm using a Class 10 16GB card because I didn't want it to go jerky. I don't think you'd need a Class 10, but I might as well put the best one in that I've got. And then on this side you've got up down to navigate through the menus, mode for the menus again, USB to charge it, and a 5-volt socket there to charge it from your car's 12-volt power socket. So let's switch it on first of all. Now, as soon as it powers up, you can see the LCD screen here, which is of course a nice little colour 2.5-inch screen. I'll talk you through some of the menu options. You can select a video size of 640 by 480 or 1280 by 720, i.e. 720p. You can have the audio on or off, that's the sound recording within the car. Motion detection, it can actually record if it sees motion, which could be quite useful because if you move the car it starts recording. Frames per second, 10, 20 or 30 frames per second, might as well stick it at 30. Recording, now this is 2, 5 or 15 minutes. What this does is this is the amount it records before it starts a new file, and it beeps every time the file re-records. So you might as well stick it at something like 5 minutes, I'd say. 15 minutes, you could lose a 15-minute section if you overwrote the card at the end, so it's your choice. The date can be set within the camera itself, which is a lot better than using one of those little files that you have to drag onto the memory card. You can change the language, of course, and the light frequency at the end here is 60 or 50 Hz, so that's obviously the frame rate. So I'm using 50 for this because I'm in the UK, and the rest of my video will also be in 50 Hz, so it'll make it easier to edit together. And on the front there you've got the lens, of course. And the only other item of note inside the box really was the mounting device, which screws into this thread at the bottom here, and then it's got the usual sort of articulated joint which can be tightened up, and a suction cup which attaches it to your windscreen. I'll just show you how that goes on the windscreen of my Mini here. If you've ever attached a sat-nav system to your car windscreen, of course it's exactly the same principle. The only thing that's different with this is you want to make sure that you're pointing it in the right direction, and you have to have it a little bit higher up on your windscreen so that you get a proper view. It looks a little bit like one of those old speed detector things that was supposed to detect radar but never really did. Now if you want, you can use it like this. It does work on a battery. I'll show you the battery life later on, but for this purpose I'm going to attach it to my car lighter socket using the socket on the right here, which of course leaves a weird wire hanging down the middle of your windscreen, but you're probably used to that if you use a satellite navigation system. And then of course just plug it into the lighter socket. Now we'll just have a look at the way that it auto starts when it's powered up according to the instruction manual. So here it is off. So our power on the ignition, the power comes on, the red light comes on the camera, the screen comes on, and then it starts recording, as you can see from the red dot at the top left hand corner of the screen there. So that's good. So let's try powering it off now. So we'll turn off the ignition, and the power stops to the lighter socket, and the screen just keeps recording and recording. So we'll pull the power lead out, and that does nothing because it's running off batteries. Unfortunately, this particular function doesn't actually work. You have to switch it off manually. But anyway, enough of this. Let's go and look at some test footage shot out on the road. Right, now I risked life and limb to get this footage because I didn't really want to go out in the snow, but I wanted to get this video out over the Christmas holiday period. As you can see at the top, the date's correct, the 22nd of December. That's when I was out filming. This is Liverpool. Well, near Liverpool. It's sort of Aintree. But anyway, that's too much information for anyone. Anyway, let's have a look at the footage. As you can see, it's nice and wide. I can see all the way across from right to left, and the shadow in front of the car that the car's generating. When I'm on a 3-lane motorway here, you can see all 3 lanes, which is a big step up from the DV10, I think it was, camera that I used, which was a little keyring camera in a sort of torch case, which only looked really dead ahead. It wouldn't have caught all 3 lanes, that's for sure. It works quite well. It copes reasonably well with light and dark. As you can see, the colours are a little bit off, but I don't suppose that matters too much if you were if you were using this for some sort of security or insurance purposes. You wouldn't really care that the colour of the car that reversed into you was slightly more orange than it should be. Now, as you can see, looking at the lens here, it's a kind of fisheye type effect. As you can see from the top of the trees there, they sort of curve in around, which is really exactly what was required for this particular camera. The idea is to capture as much footage as possible. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. So this is the first camera that I've managed to get hold of that's actually got a proper lens for the job on the front. In fact, that fisheye lens makes everything look like a 1990s Hype Williams rap video, which is quite entertaining. A couple of things that I should point out. The sound that's recorded isn't really clear enough to understand the voices of the people inside the car. And you might have noticed this flashing brightness that's particularly noticeable in this scene here, and that's the iris trying to figure out the correct brightness for the conditions, and that could be a little bit annoying for some people. And this one's a minor quibble, but a quibble all the same. If you've got the screen closed, you can't see that there's actually an indicator light on the bottom here, which is flashing to show that it's recording. So the only way to see that you're recording is to have the screen open in front of you. Not a big deal, like I said, but something that I should mention. Now, with the interest of completeness in mind, I thought I should test out the HDMI socket, which enables you to output the video to your television screen. Now, I found out that it's not a normal HDMI socket, it's an HDMI mini socket, so then I found my HDMI mini lead, plugged that into the television, but unfortunately got absolutely nothing at all coming out of it. So then I thought, well, maybe it needs more power, it can't just run off batteries. So I attached the USB lead to it, and that didn't do it. So then I tried something in the 5-volt socket on the side, and that didn't work either. So unfortunately, this function just doesn't work at all. I don't know why, but I thought I should mention it to you. One thing the specs made no mention of, but I know I'll get asked about, is the battery life. So I set it up in front of this clock, recording from 10 o'clock, and then I came back a couple of hours later to see what the last thing was that the camera recorded, and it was this, 11:21, so that's about 1 hour and 22 minutes. Now, unfortunately, in running the battery flat, it also reset the clock, which wasn't the best idea, so I wouldn't recommend doing that if you have one of these. I'd keep it charged from the lighter socket. Now, I thought I should test it in 640 by 480 because that HD footage didn't look very HD to me again. So I went out, so here's some HD footage of this row of shops, and just look at the framing on it, the bench at the bottom there and the tops of the shops. And then we'll stick it over to the VGA mode to see what that looks like. And as you can see, I can see right down to the bottom and again right up to the top. It's no wider, it's just taller, so that means that the HD footage is actually just cutting out the middle of the VGA footage. Now again, if we just flip back to the HD footage, and it's a freeze frame here, you can see that the writing on the shops there on the right is exactly the same as on the VGA footage here. So there's not an awful lot of difference between them. I mean, on some screens it seems like the VGA footage is actually a little bit less compressed. Here's the stats for the compression. If anyone's really interested, they can pause this. But the thing is, by using VGA, you actually manage to record a little bit longer on the card, as well as getting that full frame image rather than just the middle section. Another thing that I'm sure people will ask me about is the price. Well, mine costs £39.95. That was delivered from a Hong Kong eBay seller. So finally, to sum up, overall then, despite the fact it doesn't do a couple of the things it did promise to do, I think that this is actually quite a good car camera. The wide-angle lens is what really sells it to me, and it does a good job of capturing all the footage in front of your vehicle. So if this is what you want, it doesn't seem like a bad option. Thanks for watching.